Do you think that the action New Zealand's government is currently taking on climate change is sufficient, and does justice to our future generations? If not, what goals and actions would you push for in the next term if elected?
No, I don't think this government or successive governments have done good enough on the climate. Now, this isn't just a long-term problem, it's a problem impacting us now. There are social, economic, environmental reasons why we have to act. It's not just about the penguins and the polar bears, it's also about people. Now, what we need to do is set out a pathway to a low-carbon economy. The good news is that the moves to reduce our carbon emissions will also make our economy and our cities better. Investing in public transport, smart farming solutions, clean energy, these are all massive opportunities for us to reduce our emissions, but also for us to boost our prosperity as a nation. So 50 by 2050 isn't good enough, especially when the government has no plan how to get there. The Greens take the climate seriously, it's a priority for us.
Awesome, thank you very much. In your opinion, is the ETS in its current form an equitable system that delivers sufficient economic signals to emitters? What changes would you advocate to make it more efficient, if any?
Well, it's better than having no ETS or no carbon price in New Zealand. Obviously the Green Party voted for it under the Labour government, but mostly because of the other additional measures we got, such as the 100%, such as the changes on renewable electricity, such as the home insulation packages. However, we support in our policy a carbon tax, which we think is simpler, easier to understand, and also easier to recycle, to give people incentives to reduce their carbon, such as home insulation, such as public transport. So we are disappointed the national government is weakening the ETS considerably, and we think it's unfair for the taxpayer to be subsidising polluters, which we are almost $1 billion in New Zealand.
Thank you. What are your opinions on the expansion of fossil fuel industries, such as coal and lignite mining, in New Zealand? Do you personally call for the support of a 10-year moratorium on the new coal and lignite developments?
I support a moratorium on new coal and lignite developments. This is the front lines of the environmental crisis, I think, in New Zealand. If these plans go ahead, it locks us into a high carbon future for decades. Now, the capital cost of setting up such a factory, from lignite to diesel, lignite to heat, lignite to urea, that investment could be going into clean tech opportunities to reduce our emissions in New Zealand. There are going to be huge opportunity costs. I drafted a private members bill to remove the financial subsidies, which the Parliamentary Commission for the Environment estimates could be in the order of billions of dollars for the lignite scheme. The worst thing we can be doing is actually subsidising and sending an incentive for the lignite development. It's got to stay in the hole.
Cool. What do you see as the main future sources of energy for New Zealand, and do you support a call for the government to create an action plan to attain 100% renewable energy before 2050?
I think we can achieve 100% renewable electricity in wet years. Obviously what we need is a diversified electricity sector. Now, probably the most effective thing we could do in terms of renewable electricity is to simply use the electricity we have now more efficiently. So much is wasted in homes and businesses through inefficient practices. We can do more. We support the use of tidal, hydro, geothermal, and there are huge opportunities. We of course have to do the testing on the environmental impacts of new technologies like wave and tidal, but these are exciting opportunities.
How about transport as well?
So in transport we import 99% of our fuels. The average family spends $6,000 a year on fuel in New Zealand. It's one of our major imports. It's a no-brainer for the climate and for the economy to reduce our addiction to oil. The answer in the short term is better public transport. It's walking and cycling improvements. In the medium to long term, it's electric cars and other urban design initiatives and land use planning. But what we need is a government to redirect the budget of the $19 billion going on new roads and motorways towards things like a CBD rail link for Auckland, things like light rail for Wellington, public transport and active transport in the heart of a redeveloped Christchurch, not more uneconomic motorways which simply lock us into a high oil and carbon future.
Awesome. Do you think the government should be doing more to promote research, development and deployment of low carbon and more sustainable technologies and practices in New Zealand? If so, what?
Yeah, there's a whole bunch, especially from smart farming solutions through to public transport through to renewable electricity. In fact, this is one of our 3 election priorities, which is to create 100,000 jobs through green technology. This is an amazing opportunity for New Zealand globally to actually export clean technology ideas, know-how and equipment, we could be making our way and boosting our prosperity, lifting our kids out of poverty, if we focus on these exciting opportunities for New Zealand. For example, if we just got 1% of the global renewable electricity market, we could be bringing in $8 billion and providing 67,000 jobs to Kiwis. So instead of going down the high-polluting, old-fashioned industries, which current and successive governments have, we've got a strong vision towards clean tech, investing in our people, investing in research.
Awesome. Do you perceive New Zealand's dependence on oil as a risk to our economy in the age of high and increasing oil prices? Do you support the reallocation of spending on new roads towards low carbon and public transport initiatives? You've pretty much answered that already. But.
Absolutely. I think everyone acknowledges that oil prices are only going one direction in the long term. What we are going to see is increased volatility and vulnerability and higher prices. We've seen in New Zealand over the last 5 years traffic decreasing, petrol going up, and public transport growth going through the roof. In Auckland, the rail network grew by 21% last year. It's reaching capacity. That's why we would prioritise money from the roads and motorway budget towards public transport projects like the CBD rail link, light rail for Wellington, walking and cycling, coastal shipping. We've got a huge amount of options. What we saw in the last oil shock was that many Kiwis found they simply didn't have an option to not drive to school or work. Their buses weren't affordable, they weren't reliable, they weren't nearby, or in the case of my hometown Gisborne, the rail line is set for closure, so the logging companies would have no choice how to get their logs to market if we close that rail line, except using the road. So our message is we want to give Kiwis choices so they can get about their day.
Awesome. What actions would you take in your electorate to enable your community to increase their understanding of climate change and to reduce their emissions and dependence on oil?
Well, climate change isn't just a fad for the Greens. It's not just a thing you sit at the edge of your campaign. For the Greens, this is at our heart of our campaign. We want to look after the planet. We've got nowhere else to go. Now, we can't have a planet which is increasing by 2.5 parts per million every year. We're on set for catastrophic climate change. The sooner we act, the worse the impacts are going to be. So for the Greens, this is a priority. When you look at all of our election priorities, climate change will be the main winner, or reducing climate change from our policies.
Cool. And how can young New Zealanders convince the government to take stronger action on climate change?
Well, young people are providing the leadership on this issue already. From the 350 movement through to Generation Zero, it's young people taking inspiring action and showing the government where true leadership is and where the future is. You need to keep up the pressure. It's great to see you involved in politics because it's not a dirty word, it's simply our democracy and our government. So influence politicians, talk to them, send them messages. The future is too important to leave it up to them.
Awesome. Thank you very much for the talk. That was